Hey everybody, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about something that I've seen as a problem pretty consistently throughout Discords, Reddits, my own personal alliance, my interactions in the game, even things that I sometimes do if I'm too tired during PvP battles. That idea is, why aren't my counters working? What am I missing? Is there something that is different in this battle? Is it RNG? What's happening? I don't get it. What we're seeing is a lot of people are going, I lost this battle, but last time my Fantastic Four could punch up 100k on Asgard or something like that. Or, I always use power armor against defenders and I can punch up, this much normally. And for some reason I can't even get this to happen. Or, this team is always losing now. I can't get them to punch up. Or, my supernatural all of a sudden can't beat shield. Stuff like that. And a lot of times you typically, I myself included in this, write it off to RNG. This is BS, like this RNG, da-da-da-da, and it might be, could be RNG. But the thing I want to talk about that I think a lot of things or the main thing that's happening in these situations is understanding the gear tiers at 13 and 14. I know OMG did a video somewhat similar about how the stat curve goes up dramatically at 14. And I want to elaborate on that a lot more and specific to counters. I'm going to show you guys a couple things in game and some photos of some fights in game that are all similar, but some different gear tiers that likely swung the battle. And then obviously I've got to do the stats. So I'm going to show you some stats real briefly so to help to understand. And what this is all going to come down to is exactly what to look for in these counters. Don't just say, oh, it's that team. My aim always beats them. Always. Okay, and you go and it's like, what the heck just happened? I got crushed. Well, was there any gear tier 13? Was there gear tier 14? What gear tier were you? That is the biggest thing. So if you're going to take anything away from this video, take that. Understand that gear tier 13 and 14 are dramatically different from each other and dramatically different than anything before that. So anyway, let's go check out some examples first. And I'll elaborate a little bit as I go, but I think a lot of people probably know this, but I just saw it happening, and I had a conversation about it this morning again, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna shoot a video and make sure that I can get out this as much as I can and hopefully explain it, show some stats behind it, and maybe it'll help some folks. So anyway, let's get to it.
Bring me WolverThor!
Alright, first up, it's, I think, most important to understand exactly what the gear tiers look like. A lot of people, I think, do understand this, but you might miss slight things on it. It's really easy to tell for gear tier 13 and 14 right now, because there's only a couple circles. But you got to really pay attention to the color, obviously. So you can see these three right here, Black Bolt, Loki, and Hela. They have that extra band of circles around it. It's a little bit thicker versus your Captain Marvel and Shuri. That's because Hela through Black Bolt are gear tier 14. Again, most people probably know this, but I want to make sure I cover every aspect of this just in case you don't know. So you see these extra circles, that means they're gear tier 14, which is the strongest gear tier in the game, which I'll show you in a second why it's really important to know that. It makes a dramatic difference in fighting people in game. It can, if the right character is gear tier 14, it can change a complete fight. Totally. You could have won it 99 out of 100 times before, and you would get smoked, potentially, if you don't recognize that a certain character has gear tier 14, and it'll screw up your counter completely. Jump into Captain Marvel and Shuri. They are both gear tier 13. Sometimes it can get a little bit hard to see that because these thin circles, especially in war, it's hard sometimes to see them, so you might not know if it's gear tier like 10 or 9. But typically, if you see the number, if you understand how the stats go with the gear, you'll kind of know that it's a gear tier 13. Let's see here. So we've got a bunch of... Okay, so now I've got a Mystique here. She's gear tier 12. So you can see the difference between a gear tier 12, which is obviously purple, and like that's the highest purple level versus what is currently the highest gear tier for this orangish rust looking color. Now, it's technically the second rust color, so that's why it's not as elaborate as what you see on Mystique. And then as you wind down a little bit, you'll see, I think, Doctor Strange, I believe, is gear tier 11, right? And sometimes I even start getting, yeah, he's gear tier 11. So, you know, there's 9, 10, 11, and 12. So 11's like the third one in, and 12 is the fourth one in for the purple. So you can see how it kind of progressively gets more lines to it. So anyway, but there is a giant difference even from gear tier 12 to gear tier 13. And then again, I'm going to say this over and over, an astronomical one from 13 to 14. And that's what we're going to focus on a little bit here. But first, before I get into that too much, I want to show you just a couple battles and how they swung different ways. I don't have a video of it, but I'm just going to show you the results. And I think by you seeing it, you can see some of, oh, well, yeah, I could see how that would, you know, swing in a certain way. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a Fantastic Four attacking an Asgardian team on defense. And there was no tap here. It was a one-shot from this Fantastic Four to the Asgardians. But if you notice, and this is a different thing, is this Shuri is being used. So that's a whole counter separation. That's a little sneak. Shuri with Asgardians, or with Fantastic Four, helps punch up against Asgardians. So talking about this a little bit with my alliance, saying, hey, you know, this is a potential counter for Asgardians if we can one-shot them, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that I want to point out here, though, in this fight is that let's see, the Asgardians have a T14 Hela, T14 Thor, and the other three are all T13. And if you go over to the Fantastic Four, Invisible Woman is T14. Most importantly here, Johnny Storm obviously has red stars on him, but also is T13. So is Namor, so is Shuri. Mr. Fantastic is T12, and he's by far the one closest to death. So you could see that he was either targeted, obviously, or there's a big gear tier difference there that these guys are going to really kind of rip them apart. But you could see that your Human Torch likely is being able to take a little bit of hits here because he's T13. He's not T12. If he was T12, I bet he died. He wouldn't make it. He's done. But he was able to survive more for longer because of the fact he had this gear tier 13, and this punch up could work. Obviously, again, there's some RNG here. Shuri, Mr. Fantastic, if Human Torch potentially gets, you know, the Loki special, I mean, he's T13, so he might be able to take it because there's not a lot of heavy hitters in this group. You know, Thing hitting him, it's not there. So anyway, that's the review number one. This is the baseline going, okay, that Fantastic Four just punched up almost 100K against an Asgardian team. How? Why? How come I can't duplicate that? And one of the things you have to look at is these gear tiers. Okay, so, and again, RNG could play to it, but gear tiers are important. Let's look at the next one. And it was a pure Fantastic Four, and it's like about 110K. Now, you're like, well, wait a minute, this punch up worked, and they're gear tier 12 and only 113. While the Asgardians, you've got 114 in Hela, and 3 13s. So you've got Sif, Loki, and Thor all in 13, and Heimdall in a gear tier 12. And this Fantastic Four barely won. Now, again, you've got the Thing in here. That, to me, is indifference. But the thing that I want to point out here is this Asgardian, or this Fantastic Four barely won, and this was a tap. So this was already tapped, and this Fantastic Four came in at this gear tier and barely won. And again, it's 110K, so it's impressive, but when you're looking at 100K solo tap, with that different gear, with almost equivalent gear tier, Shuri maybe made a difference a little bit. She's not going to make that huge of a difference, comparatively speaking, when you're looking at this barely winning after a solo tap. Again, it's huge, but it barely gets done. And you got to look at gear tier 12, 12, 13, 12, 12, versus a 14, 13, 13, 13, and a 12 Heimdall. But Hela at 14, she's a monster. Thor, if he's 14, forget about it. That match would not have been won. All right, I want to look at one more. Okay, so this is the one I want to look at the most. This one was not tapped. It was just a single go, and it's the same team as the one I showed before with the Fantastic Four winning versus the Asgardians and in a one-shot. So this is a one-shot. Both team. It's a Fantastic Four with Shuri against an Asgardians. So on the Fantastic Four, we've got Namor, Invisible Woman, and Shuri all gear tier 13. But Human Torch, your biggest damage dealer, and Mr. Fantastic, who's your assist guy, are only gear tier 12. So you've lost, obviously, all 5 of them. And if you look at the Asgardians here, you've got Thor at a T14, Hela at 13, and some red stars, clearly by the 105. Sif at the 14, and then Loki and Heimdall both at tier T12. And granted, he took out the Thor, who's the biggest one. And I talked to Abba a little bit about this. He says he could have played it slightly differently and maybe had it work out some. But I still think that the gear tier difference here is the biggest reason that this fight was not successful. No matter how talented Abba is at countering in war and doing things perfect, I think 9 or 8 out of 10 times this Fantastic Four team at this gear tier is going to lose to a Asgardian team that's got a T14 Thor or Hela, and then 2 other Asgardians that are also T13. And then you add on top of the fact that the other 2 Asgardians are equivalent to your Fantastic Four at T12. So this is the biggest point I want to make out of this, is that watch these circles. When you're getting ready to match up in war, look for this big, let me zoom in here. That's as big as I can get. Actually, I take that back. So see this Thor? See that type of orange circle? When you see that in war, pay attention to it. Or in Blitz, or in Arena. When you see that, it is a huge deal. Huge. And even if you've got, T13s, you got probably a 4 or 5 red star Invisible Woman and Namor, probably a 4 red star Shuri, but a little bit lower gear on Human Torch and Mr. Fantastic, it's going to be tough to do this. And I appreciated Abba for actually taking this attempt, because that was kind of the catalyst. It was like, hey, wait a minute, I want to show this a little bit more, so that when people are testing these, or trying these, or seeing these, or getting frustrated by these, that they see that it's probably has to do with the bigger orange circle, and it's that simple. So before we get out of here, I want to look at one stat thing so you understand, outside of just seeing, well, there's a big orange rustic circle there. What's the meaning behind that circle? And we'll look at Thor specifically. So let's check out some stats before we go. Okay, so now, as you know, I have a ton of spreadsheets. That's just what I do. In this specific one, I look at just one character and their stat increase from tier 10 to 14. And this is the part that I was talking about that OMG had done a video before, where he had a nice curve on it, but I'm not sure that people are picking up on this enough. So I want to do something else on it, and I wanted to get this video out, try to share, try to just show these stats so that you can see how big of a change it makes when you go from one to the next. So what I've got here is tier 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And then I've got Thor's health in each one of those. Okay, and I've done this at 7 yellow, 0 red, and 25% Stark Tech, based on MSF.GG stats. So Thor's health at tier 10 from 90k, at 11 it goes to 96, 97k, which is a 6.89% increase. From 11 to 12, it goes up from 96k to 101k, which is about a 4.5% increase. Up to tier 13, so tier 12 to 13, it's not huge, it's pretty close, but it's 106k health, and that's a 4.6% increase. But when you get to tier 14, it goes from 106k to 130k. That is an 18% increase. That is more than all 3 of these combined. So you might as well take a tier 9 or 10 against a tier 13 if you think tier 13 equals tier 14. It's not close. It's the same. Tier 9 going against tier 13 is the same as tier 13 going against tier 14 stat-wise. It's the same thing. Okay? So recognize that. Understand that. Looking at the damage here. Tier 10, 8,700. Tier 11, 9,200. Tier 12, 9,600. Tier 13, what is that? 10,000. Tier 14, 12,000. 18% increase when you go to tier 14. Again, more than all 3 of these combined. All 3 of these combined are 14% increase. So from 10 to 13, it's a 14% increase. To 14, it's an 18%. Huge jump in power. Huge jump. Okay? And this stays consistent throughout here. Armor, you're seeing the same thing. 7%, 4.5%, 4.5%, 18%. Focus, almost 5%, 4.2%, 4.5%, 41% focus jump for Thor. 41%. 41%. That's crazy. Resistance, and this is where you're really going to see it. This is it. Culmination of the video right here. 41% increase in the resistance. That's where it's really going to hit you. Why can't I land anything on Captain Marvel? Why can't I land anything on Minerva? Why can't I land anything on Thor? What kind of rustic circle do they have? Is it a huge orange rustic circle around them indicating they're gear tier 14? That's why. Okay, so unless you're gear tier 14, you are not going to land anything on them, or very unlikely going to land anything on them. It is because there is a gigantic resistance increase there. Anyway, so that's it. That's it. All of that I'm going to say. So comment if you didn't remember anything else in that video. Remember this. Pay attention to the rustic circles around characters' profiles, okay? If you see a big orange circle, bigger, that means you got to pay attention to it, because they've got such higher stats than what you've got anything lower than that, that you're likely not going to land any of your debuffs. You're not going to hit them as hard. They're going to be way beefier than what you're going to expect. Okay? So, and that might be why your counters aren't working. So anyway, that's all I got to say about that. I hope this video is helpful. Again, this is random. It just kind of, as we were talking this morning, I was thinking about it. I talked with some other folks about it, you know, and just say, hey, you know, are you guys seeing this? And it seems like a lot of people are. Yeah, people aren't recognizing some of these circles in game. Or thinking, hey, why isn't my counter not working? So I hope this helps. Even if it helps 3 people say, oh, I got to pay attention to the circles. That's what I want. I'm happy. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. Again, as always, I'm hoping this helps. Share with your alliance mates, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, cousin, anybody, whatever. It's great. Click on the notification bell. Hammer down on the like button. Subscribe. All the goodness. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.